Hey guys, as we wind down tonight, we find ourselves shuffling slowly across a sun-baked courtyard in ancient Athens. Your sandals are too thin, your scroll case too heavy, and the wax tablet sticking to your hip is starting to melt. Again, somewhere nearby, a donkey sneezes. Not yet. You're just a 9-year-old boy, late for class, sweaty, confused, and already regretting the day's decisions. The teacher's voice drones on like an overconfident cicada. The floor is dusty, the lesson's endless, and your only pencil is a stick with aspirations. Tonight, we're going back to school. Ancient Greek school, which sounds impressive until you realize it's mostly lectures, barefoot errands, and a lot of being yelled at in iambic pentameter. And yes, you might not survive this one. It helps the channel more than you know, and keeps the wax tablets from collapsing under their own existential dread. To see people tuning in from so many corners of the world, now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that gentle hum in the background, and together, let's ease into tonight's story. You're late. Not fashionably late. Not a few minutes after the bell. Kind of late. Without blinking, while 30 other boys look up from their wax tablets with the speed of starving dogs, hearing a soup pot rattle. Now you are also sweating. Heavily. Gone. Rolled down the hill like it's staging a philosophical protest. Again, you chase it. Of course you do. Down the stone steps, past a sleeping dog, under the legs of a fish vendor, narrowly avoiding a low-hanging pot of olives and one very confused priest. You retrieve it eventually, but the scroll inside is slightly crushed and now smells faintly of salted mackerel. The class doesn't stop for you. Of course not. No one's going to pause Euclid for your dramatic entrance. You shuffle to the back of the room, trying not to make noise. Which of course you do. Your scroll squeaks. Your tablet drops. Because there are no chairs, only mats, worn smooth by decades of shifting feet and boredom. The scent in the room is educational in itself. Old ink, sun-baked sweat, and that sour, waxy odor that every boy's wax tablet eventually produces, like it's fermenting frustration. You forgot your stylus. It's not really your fault. Your little brother was using it to practice etching the family donkey-s name into the side of your house. But the teacher doesn't want to hear about donkeys. Wants you to copy down a full page of Homeric hexameter from memory, and that's when you realize your neighbor has a slave. You warm your own wax, which melts too far. You try to write, but the letters wobble. Your arm aches. And the teacher is now quoting Plato in a voice like thunder, having an existential crisis. Outside, a lyre player strikes a single sour note. You glance at your feet. Dusty. Cracked. One sandal strap snapped and hanging on by a thread. Literally a thread. Your toes feel philosophical in the worst possible way. You stand, wax tablet in hand, words half written, and begin to recite. Your voice cracks. You misquote. Someone snorts behind you. The teacher stares as if you just insulted Pythagoras' triangle personally. Sit down wrongly. On someone's stylus. Yes. Your scroll case rolls away again. The lesson is about rhythm today. Poetic meter, the heartbeat of verse. As if volume is the missing ingredient in your understanding. Not, say, sleep, food, or joy. You try to focus. You really do. But the tablet in front of you is scratched. You smooth it with your thumb. The wax resists. The stylus skips. Your line of Homer turns into something that resembles either a confession or a culinary warning. Your ink pot, such as it is, sits nearby. Nothing happens. You add water. Now it's too thin. You try to mix. The boy next to you leans over and sighs. Loudly. He's already finished his assignment and is now drawing an anatomically questionable centaur in the margins. He smells like lavender oil. You consider tripping him at lunch, but you weren't fast enough to look busy, and now you are the chosen sacrifice on the altar of rhetorical questioning. He asks something about Homer. You panic and name a fish. The class laughs, except for the teacher, who now has a vein pulsing in his temple like an angry worm. You will be writing lines after class. Again, you dip your stylus. It snaps. The tip goes flying into someone's sandal, who shrieks and kicks backward. A cascade of wax tablets falls like philosophical dominoes. The teacher says your name. Slowly, like it's being carved into a tombstone. You apologize. Tells you apologies don't count unless they rhyme. You do not know how to rhyme under pressure. Somewhere outside, someone sneezes. You envy their freedom. The floor is hard. The sun is too bright. You shift and knock your ink pot over. It spreads like a prophecy. Black soot bleeds toward the sandals of your neighbor, who lifts his feet as if your failure might be contagious. Honestly, it might be. The teacher says you have the soul of a goat and no lunch today because you left your coin pouch at home again. But that's fine. Who needs food when you've got philosophical shame and a headache that rhymes with tragedy? By the time the sun slants past the shutters and the shadows on the wall begin to stretch like lazy philosophers lounging across a symposium floor, your stomach is beginning to speak in tongues, loudly, with great theological conviction. It's midday, technically lunch, but there is no bell, no canteen, no break room with reclining couches and imported olives. There is only the teacher pausing his lecture to sip from a dented flask and gaze into the distance as if he, too, has forgotten why he came here. You reach into your satchel. There should be something. A bit of bread, a piece of fig, a few sad olives stuffed in a leaf, but no. All you find is wax shavings, a broken reed pen, and one small pebble of unknown purpose. You chew the pebble anyway. Tastes like disappointment and grit. Meanwhile, your classmates pull out their meals. Or rather, their slaves do. Platters appear. Little ones, wrapped in cloth and tied with string. Soft cheese. Sweet dates. Gold. Barley cakes with patterns pressed by careful hands. You look down at your pebble and feel your status ossify. The boy next to you has a grape. One, large, purple. He eats it like a ritual. You envy him so hard it makes your jaw hurt. Still, you try to stay dignified. A philosopher does not beg for crumbs. He endures. He contemplates. He starves attractively. Except the teacher has started reading again, and the word hunger appears in the text. You flinch. Cruel coincidence. Then the word feast. Then roasted lamb. You glance upward. Does he do this on purpose? A fly buzzes near your mouth. You consider opening wider. Then, suddenly, a kindness. An older boy next to you passes you a bit of barley bread. It is hard, so hard. You thank him, softly, and attempt to bite it. It resists. Your teeth bounce off like they've encountered a philosophical paradox in biscuit form. You soak it in the ink water? A mistake. Now it tastes like knowledge and soot. Still you chew. You chew like someone with a mortgage made of expectations. You chew until your jaw clicks. And it's almost satisfying, until a grain of sand embedded in the bread cracks loudly under your molar. You do not cry. You do not scream. You simply lean back, stare at the ceiling, and wonder how many more years of this are left. 7, 8. Forever philosophy is hungry work, and apparently, so are you. Break time has arrived. In theory, the teacher leaves the room. That's it. That's the entire transition. There's no bell, no announcement. It's just the scrape of his sandals and the fading echo of his philosophical. It's muttering as he disappears into a side alley to relieve himself or scream into a pot. The students do not erupt in joy. There is no cheering. They sigh, shift, scratch at their ankles. You do the same. Slowly, carefully, because sudden movements might dislodge your one functional sandal. And you can't afford to chase it again today. You look around. Some students stretch, others scribble graffiti into the wall. Crude sketches of donkeys, heads too large, limbs questionable. One boy, who's been held back 3 years for bad grammar, has perfected the art of carving Socrates' smells in several dialects. You need to relieve yourself too. But this is ancient Greece, and bathrooms aren't exactly cozy tiled chambers with lemon-scented soap and inspirational quotes. They are communal. You find the nearest latrine. It's a row of stone seats, public, unforgiving, and unapologetically breezy in all the wrong ways. A shallow trench runs beneath, with water supposedly if the aqueducts are cooperating today. There's no door, no privacy, just a communal sponge on a stick. You hesitate. For good reason. The sponge looks tired, like it's seen things, like it whispers at night. It rests in a shallow basin of salt water that does nothing to inspire confidence. You tell yourself you're a rational person, that hygiene is relative, so that everyone else uses it and seems fine. They're not fine. They're resigned. You brace yourself. You try not to breathe. You do what must be done. You leave the sponge as you found it, which is to say in despair. Back at the schoolhouse, the air is thick with the scent of warm bodies and wax. Stray dog has wandered in and curled up in the corner. He looks better rested than anyone else in the room. Someone has stolen your stylus. Again, you don't say anything, because in ancient school, theft is not punished unless it interrupts the teacher's metaphor. And no one has noticed your loss except you and the dog, and he is not offering help. You sigh. Scratch another line into your wax tablet with a broken reed. The break is over. Teacher returns, smelling faintly of herbs and faint rage. Doesn't ask where anyone went. He simply picks up where he left off. Mid-sentence, mid-philosophy, mid-condemnation of modern youth. You shift back onto the stone floor, knees aching, stomach still echoing. This was your break. And now it's over. Afternoons are not for learning. They're for napping, sulking, and regretting your childhood choices. But in ancient Greece, the afternoon is where philosophy comes to bloom. Or in your case, to wilt slowly in the heat while your eyelids stage a quiet revolt. The sun slants lower now, stabbing sideways through the window slits, making you squint at your wax tablet, which has begun to melt again. It's turned into a sticky, reflective puddle of symbols you may or may not have written. Some of it looks like Homer, some of it might be soup. The teacher is still speaking. His voice has not changed volume or tone since this morning. It just keeps going. A droning, relentless stream like someone pouring warm olive oil over your brain. You are asked a question, or someone is. You hope it isn't you. You stare at your tablet as if it will rescue you. It does not. It simply reflects the faint image of your nose and the smear of ink from earlier. The stylus is still missing. You've now resorted to etching letters with a chicken bone you found near the door. Who can name the 3 parts of the soul? You consider answering. You think of courage, of appetite, of reason. But all that comes to mind is hunger, aching knees, and the desire to never hear the phrase immortal soul again. Your classmate raises his hand. He gets it right. Of course he does. He always does. His father is a rhetorician, his sandals are new, and you're pretty sure his slave polishes his scrolls. You nod politely while resenting his entire existence. Another question. We're chosen. Again, the teacher is staring, eyebrows arched like twin cliffs, daring you to jump. You open your mouth. Nothing comes out then. Plato. It's not an answer. It's just a name, but it's enough to get a nod. Relieved, you slouch back against the wall. Bee buzzes nearby, drawn to the ink stains on your tunic. You swat lazily and miss. The bee stays. It's invested now. Outside, voices echo. Merchants, donkeys, children not in school. Lucky children, illiterate children, free children. The lesson turns to ethics. You tune in just in time to hear a lecture on self-control while your stomach groans like a dying oracle and your elbow itches from sitting in wax. The teacher gestures broadly, almost poetically, about virtue. Psh. He stops mid-sentence. All heads turn. You say sorry. He says the virtuous do not interrupt. You are assigned another essay, on restraint. The irony is not lost on you, nor is the growing heat, nor the fly now dancing circles near your ear like it, composing its own ode to suffering. You reach for your scroll. It crumbles slightly at the edge. Pretend it's symbolic. Your thoughts drift. Maybe tomorrow, you'll fake an illness. A dramatic cough. A sudden collapse. A claim that your humors are misaligned. But you know the truth. Tomorrow, you'll be here again. With the same melted tablet, the same unreadable notes, and probably the same bee. Class ends with no ceremony. No farewell. Just the teacher declaring, "That's enough," and walking out, still mid-sentence, as if the knowledge has become too bored with itself to continue. You stay seated a moment longer. It's not because you're meditating on the day's lessons, but because your legs have forgotten how to bend properly. Rising requires effort, willpower, a certain degree of spiritual negotiation. You finally stand, knees cracking like poorly made pottery, and begin to gather your things. What's left of them? Your stylus gone, your wax tablet scratched beyond repair and faintly gooey at the corners. Your scrolls. Oh no, they have been crushed. Someone stepped on them during the ethics lecture. There's a heel mark right through a line of verse, like Socrates himself is stomping on your dreams. You roll them up anyway. What else can you do? Outside, the sun is too bright. The dust is theatrical, rising in little clouds with every step. You squint down the hill. Home is somewhere at the bottom, probably, unless your mother has moved in frustration because you forgot to bring home oil again. You begin the walk. Slowly, carefully. Your scroll case. Tied shut now with a bit of twine that used to be part of your sandal. Swings behind you like a passive-aggressive tail. As you pass the agora, a man selling boiled chickpeas offers you one. For a price, you check your pouch. Still empty. The pouch itself has begun to fray, as if ashamed of its own poverty. You decline the chickpea. He looks at you like you've rejected a gift from Apollo. Halfway down the hill, your other sandal strap gives up, flops loose, dangling like a defeated worm. And you reforce to hobble the rest of the way with one foot bare and the other barely participating. You pass a goat. It stares at you, long, deeply. You feel judged. You glare back. The goat chews slowly, unimpressed. At home, your mother asks what you learned. You say something vague about Plato and bees. She nods. She's not really listening. She's holding a broken pot and muttering about leaks. You sit. You try to read over your notes. They're illegible. Between the melting, the scratches, and the ink blots, it looks like a failed prophecy or a recipe for philosophical stew. You close the scroll. You stare into space. The goat is still watching from the street. You're not sure who's the wiser between you. Evening comes reluctantly. The Athenian sky turns from white to gold to that particular shade of dusty bronze that makes everything look either wise or extremely tired. The cicadas begin their creaky chorus as if reciting their own endless syllogisms. And you have homework. Your fingers are still sticky from whatever passed for dinner. Barley porridge with pickled something, possibly radish, possibly regret. You lick one finger and wince. That was vinegar, strong enough to pickle your soul. You unroll your scroll, flattens with a tired sigh, like even the parchment knows it doesn't deserve this. The assignment is clear. Transcribe 2 pages of text, explain the symbolism in a particular myth, and answer a set of questions on ethics. Easy if you're a demigod with good lighting and no distractions. You, however, are working by oil lamp. Poor one. It sputters like it's having second thoughts. The flame dances wildly, then settles into a sullen glow, illuminating half your scroll and all of your mounting frustration. You dip your new stylus, a splintered reed you sharpened on a roof tile, into your ink. Too much. It drips, splatters. One drop lands directly where you were about to write virtue. Another lands on your leg. You consider it symbolic. You are, after all, living proof that philosophy stains. The first line takes 10 minutes. Second, you spell something wrong. Twice, you scratch it out, but your wax tablet is unforgiving. It now reads like a poem written during a nervous breakdown. Then your brother crashes into the room, yelling about figs. He's sticky, barefoot, and wearing a wreath made of kitchen herbs. He wants to know if donkeys can vote. You say no? Demands evidence? You throw a scroll at him, not your good one, the broken one. It flutters midair and lands directly in the family's oil jar, knocking it over. Oil spreads. Over the table, over your homework, over your foot. You inhale deeply, philosophically. You stare at the puddle. Your mother enters. She does not scream. She sighs. The sigh of generations. The oil is scooped back into the jar with a shell. You blot your scroll with the hem of your tunic. The homework now smells like lamp fuel and failure. The lamp flickers again. You try to relight it. It goes out. Of course it does. Finish your homework by moonlight, or you try. You write the final sentence half blind, half furious, and wholly convinced that Plato invented education as a revenge fantasy. Eventually, the night quiets. The house settles into its creaky rhythm, shutters rattling in the breeze. Someone snoring behind a thin wall, and your brother whispering to himself about fig-based democracy. You lie on a straw mat. Crunches. There is something sharp in the corner, probably a leftover bean or the edge of a dried olive pit. You shift. It follows. It's personal now, Above you, the stars glint. Clear, infinite, mocking. Somewhere, someone probably once said they're guides to greatness. To you, they just look like distant, unsolvable questions. You try to sleep. But your brain is still chewing on the day's lessons, like a dog with a philosophical shoe. What did the teacher mean about the good? Was that related to truth or bread? Could truth be bread? Was bread ever good? You blink. The stars do not answer. You remember the bee from earlier? It may still be in your satchel. Think about tomorrow. Another day. Another walk. Another scroll to chase down a hill. Maybe the same goat. Maybe worse. You try to imagine a different life. A quiet one. Maybe as a shepherd. You've heard they sleep more. Or as a potter. Clay doesn't talk back. Clay doesn't assign essays. But no, you are a student, which means you are expected to rise early, memorize things, and remain seated for hours without developing rage or scoliosis. Your stomach growls again, loudly, philosophically. You sigh and reach under your mat. Sometimes you stash emergency snacks, a fig, a date, a piece of something that once resembled food. Tonight, it's a pebble again. You put it back, maybe it's lucky, maybe it's cursed. Either way, it's better company than your notes. You roll over, the mat creaks. Your elbow finds the bean again. You mutter something unprintable in Homeric Greek and stare up at the ceiling. There's a spider. You name it Aristotle. It does not respond. The night drags on. You try counting scrolls. Get to 7 before realizing that's just the number you've lost this week. Sleep finally arrives. Not as a gentle descent, but as a sudden drop into a dream where your stylus writes itself. The scrolls never unroll, and your teacher's voice sounds strangely like the goat. You wake up before the sun rises, not because you want to, but because your brother moved around in his sleep. Now he's lying on your foot and snoring into your face. He's hugging a jug of olives like it's something important. You push him off. He grunts and rolls over. You sit up slowly. No, the straw mat has left red lines on your back. You stretch, but the marks stay. The air feels a little too warm. And everything smells like oil, old sandals, and sleep. Your scrolls are still there. They're wrinkled and stained. Last night, you spilled lamp oil on them. The corners are curling. The ink looks faded. You already know the teacher won't accept any excuse. You once gave a student punishment essays just for yawning during class. You stand up and step onto the floor. It's cold. It's not the kind of cold that wakes you up. It's a kind that makes your feet pull back. You sigh and move toward the basin. The water is cold, too. It hits your face fast. You flinch. It smells like yesterday's soap. You look at your reflection in the water. Your face looks tired, a little green. Maybe it's the light. Maybe it's just how you feel. You check for food. You find half of a barley cake from yesterday. It looks flat. Maybe someone stepped on it. You break off a corner that looks safe and take a bite. It's hard. Crunches in a strange way. You decide not to think about what that crunch was. You roll up your scrolls again, tie them with the same old string. It's starting to wear out. You grab your stylus. It's bent. Someone probably chewed on it. You don't know who, but it still works, so you take it. Outside, the sky is pale and quiet. City is waking up. Potters move their tools. Someone is shouting about fish. A man nearby is reading poetry so loudly it sounds like something urgent. You walk toward school. The hill is still steep. Your sandal, which you fixed with a bit of cloth yesterday, slips, but it doesn't break. You whisper a small thank you to yourself. Then you see the others, the students. Some are laughing, some look sleepy. One boy is riding in a litter. He's lying down like a prince. Someone next to him is holding his scrolls and waving a fan. He looks calm. You do not. You reach the school just in time. The teacher's already speaking. Let us begin with the virtues of discipline. Of course. The same man once threw a sandal at a student for getting a quote wrong, and now he wants to talk about discipline. You sit down on your mat. It's a little damp. Your stylus rolls away again. You believe it's nearly the end of the day, though belief at this point is less philosophical and more desperate. Time inside this schoolroom no longer behaves the way it does in polite society. It doesn't march or glide, meanders, loops back on itself, doubles down, occasionally collapses into itself like a bored amphora, giving up on standing upright. The teacher has been speaking for what feels like the duration of 2 crop cycles. Think the subject is metaphysics? though the transition from cosmological purpose to cobbler-s wax was so seamless that you now suspect you. VE wandered into a lecture on shoemaking without being told. The words float in the warm, stale air, like the rising steam of a confused soup, full of unfamiliar ingredients and aggressively theoretical seasoning. Your stylus rests limply in your fingers, tacky with old wax and possibly olive oil. Your wax tablet, once a place of learning, now resembles the aftermath of an octopus having an existential meltdown. Each line, a tentacle of your wandering thoughts, none of them connected to any actual knowledge. You glance to your left. The student beside you remains a monument to precision. His notes are immaculate, evenly spaced, and underlined in 3 shades of ink. He uses a straight edge, probably sleeps with it. There is something deeply suspicious about anyone who brings a ruler to a philosophy class. You doubt he has friends, but you assume his scrolls are alphabetized. Your eye twitches. The teacher turns slowly, the kind of slow that suggests a neck long accustomed to disappointment, and asks the question, one he's likely asked every week since Athens last paved a road. What is the essence of being? A flicker of rebellion lights up in you. You almost raise your hand and say simply, tired. But you don't. Instead, you fix your gaze on the floor. It seems more stable than the conversation, and marginally more responsive. Your mind, meanwhile, begins its usual afternoon migration. What if you left, right now, stood up, muttered something cryptic about destiny, and walked straight out the door? Maybe you'd sail to the islands, open a philosophical tavern, or become a pirate who robs cargo ships of intangible ideas and sells counterfeit wisdom to confused merchants. But of course you won't. Your father would disown you by breakfast. Your mother would chase you with a broom soaked in vinegar. And your teacher would immortalize your departure in his memoirs under the heading, "The Boy Who Thought Too Little, It's Too Late, So You Stay Seated." Outside the windowless wall, the city continues its chaotic symphony. There are sandals on stone, a rooster who clearly misunderstands time, and someone yelling about fig prices as though national policy hangs in the balance. It all sounds so gloriously alive. Your stomach rumbles. It's not subtle. The student beside you offers you a withering glance that implies your digestion is disrupting the sacred harmony of his underlining. You glare back. He offers no bread, he never does, the teacher continues, now quoting something probably important. But your brain has devolved into static. A low hum filled with bees, fog, and a faint urge to nap face down on the table. You blink, straighten your back, and for a split second, imagine rising with the clarity of a prophet. You would deliver a speech, not rehearsed, but instinctive. The kind of statement that would echo in marble halls and make the old men nod. The kind of sentence that would make your teacher gasp at last. A mind emerges. But instead, what escapes your lips is, "Can I go?" The teacher pauses, then sighs. The weary exhale of a man whose last drop of hope was wrung out sometime during the Peloponnesian War. He nods. You leave. Not victorious, not enlightened, simply released. Outside, the sky is the color of a scroll left out in the rain, then forgotten and sat on by a goat. The light is gray, indifferent. You take a step toward home, and your sandal strap snaps with the soft finality of something that never truly believed in you. Of course it does. You walk barefoot once again. At the bottom of the hill, a goat watches you from behind a bush. He chews with slow purpose, his eyes narrow, filled with a kind of ancient judgment, usually reserved for poorly performed tragedies. You pause. He doesn't blink. You nod. He nods. There is an understanding between you now. You don't remember the first time you met Philin. God, he was always sort of there. He never entered the room. He arrived, gently, like the scent of olive oil or the feeling of guilt when you forget your uncle. Yes. Named during festival season, Philin wasn't young. He wasn't old. He simply existed in that vague category of perpetual scholar. With robes that never quite stopped smelling like ink and sandals that squeaked as if protesting philosophy itself, he didn't shout. This alone made him strange. In a world where teachers often delivered lectures like declarations of war, Philon spoke like he was telling a secret, to everyone all at once. Today he'd murmur, "We consider whether knowing something makes it true." You'd lean in, because you were eager. but because otherwise you couldn't hear him. And maybe that was the point. Philin believed in thinking, not memorizing. I'm quoting. Thinking, he said, the best thoughts came like slow bread. Hard to knead, easy to burn, but worth the wait. You did not always understand him? Sometimes he would ask questions that felt less like academic challenges and more like polite invitations into an existential maze. If a man speaks wisely, but no one hears him, is it still wisdom? You would blink. You would stare. You would wonder if this was code for something, or if he was just tired. But over time, you grew to like him. He wore the same robe every day, brown, patched, fraying at the edges like a scroll that had passed through to many hands. He chewed on his stylus, sometimes forgot what he was saying mid-sentence, and instead told stories about olives. Always olives. You never figured out why. One day he stopped mid-liaison and simply sat down, right on the floor, cross-legged. Let us think horizontally, he said. A student coughed. Another tried not to laugh. Philin didn't mind. He once said, "Laughter is just philosophy with dust in its sandals." You wrote that down? Not because you understood it, but because it sounded wise. He was not popular, not exactly. Some students wanted structure, clarity, shouting. Philin offered none of these. He offered silence, space, wax tablets filled with half-finished ideas, and an open-ended question about what it meant to learn. And so, when the replacement came, the one with the booming voice, the colorful charts, and the ability to project across 3 city blocks, no one was surprised. But you were. You missed the silence. You missed the confusion. You missed Philin. You still do. The first thing you noticed was the sandals, not the man. Right. Not his voice, not his scrolls or his towering presence. His sandals. They were bright, new, stiff. The kind of sandals that squeaked not because they were worn, but because they were proud. You could practically hear them saying, "Observe. I am here to improve things." Then came the voice. It filled the room like boiling wine. Hot, strong, and almost impossible to ignore. The teacher had arrived. Didn't say hello, he announced. "I am Minox," he bellowed, "and you will learn to think like men." You were already thinking. You'd been thinking all morning about the curvature of beans and whether goats had emotions. But this apparently didn't count. Minox held up a chart. Yes, a chart. Brightly colored, suspiciously well-crafted, with circles and arrows and a timeline that felt more ambitious than anything we'd ever seen in the schoolhouse. The students leaned forward, mostly out of fear. "Let's begin," he said, with logic. The chart snapped open. It hit the air like a flatulence of knowledge. You missed Philin already. Under Philin, logic had been a long walk in a quiet grove. Under Minox, logic was a chariot race. Loud, fast, and full of crashing. He paced as he spoke, rapidly, with the determination of a man chasing a metaphor up a hill. "He who contradicts himself," he thundered, "contradicts the gods." You nodded. Everyone nodded. No one dared not to. The questions came quickly, rhetorical ones. No room for reflection, no time for wax tablets, just yes or no. You said yes to something about numbers. You weren't sure what. He praised you loudly. You felt confused, praised. Philin never praised. Philin let you flounder in silence until your thoughts grew roots. This was different. This was performance. The students liked it, most of them. They laughed when he made jokes, which he did often, about other teachers, about Philin. They laughed. "Some men think slowly," Minox said once, "because their thoughts are still asleep." They laughed. Didn't the new teacher brought scrolls? Handouts, chalk. He didn't know what chalk was. He drew diagrams. He didn't know if they helped. But they were impressive and loud. Very loud. At the end of the lesson, your head was ringing. Your wax tablet had one word on it. Chariots. You stared at it for a long time, then packed your things in silence. You passed the old corner where Philon used to sit. It was dusty. Forgotten. The sunbeam didn't even touch it anymore. You sighed. Minox's sandals squeaked behind you. Triumphantly. It begins with a drum, not a metaphorical one. A literal drum. You're sitting. It's trying to remember if logic includes remembering your own name when it's yelled across a classroom. when suddenly the new teacher, Minox, slams a drumstick onto a small, very confident-looking drum. "Attention," he yells. As if the drum wasn't enough, you flinch. Everyone flinches. Even the dog that wandered in last week raises an eyebrow. "Today," Minox proclaims, "we demonstrate the golden ladder of reason." "You don't know what that is?" But it sounds expensive. He gestures behind him. A young boy, probably. A nephew or some apprentice who's never known peace drags in a series of large painted boards. On them are words, big ones. Words like perception, thought, and conclusion, written in crimson ink and outlined in gold paint that has started. "To peel, the class stares," this Minox says. "Slapping the top board is where we begin." He slaps each one, top to bottom. The sound is wet. Like logic being punished, he starts shouting, not explaining, shouting. He calls on students by name, then by sandals, then by hairstyle. You're asked to describe the difference between belief and knowledge. You open your mouth. You try, really. Do, but the drum sounds again, and you forget what letters are. You say something about figs. It is. Not correct. Minox frowns, then smiles. "Wrong," he says. But brave, he laughs. The class laughs. You smile, sort of you miss Philin. Under Philin, wrong answers sat in the air for a while, like smoke, until someone else gently blew them away here. Wrong answers are spectacles. Entertainment. The latter demonstration continues. He makes the apprentice climb up it physically, holding a sign that says truth. The boy looks terrified. The ladder wobbles. He reaches the top. Everyone claps. You clap too. Not for the message. For the boy's survival, then, Minox asks, "What comes after truth?" You whisper lunch. Someone hears. There's laughter again. You look down at your wax tablet. The edge is now soft and drooping from your nervous thumb dash rubbing. The demonstration ends. The drum is hit again. You all file out slowly, like tired philosophers fleeing a parade as you leave. You glance at the corner where Philin once stood. The dust has gathered. No sunbeam today. It's just shadows. You wonder what he would have said about the ladder. Probably. Something quiet. Possibly about olives. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. It begins with a glance. You're not looking for trouble. You're looking for the corner where the wax doesn't stick to your tunic. But your eyes meet someone else's, a boy in the back row. Older, smarter. Smirking in a way that suggests he's already read. 3 scrolls ahead and is deeply unimpressed. He leans toward you, says nothing. But he raises one eyebrow with such precision that it conveys a full sentence. This is nonsense. You nod, almost imperceptibly. Because even rebellion must be quiet when the teacher is loud enough to crack olive jars. Today's lesson is about rhetoric. Minox is in his element. He strides the room like a general rehearsing for a festival. Play. His arms sweep. His voice projects. He makes metaphors fight each other in midair. The mind, he says, is a liar, and only discipline can tune it. You're pretty sure your lyre snapped 3 weeks ago, at the back of the room. The quiet boy, you think his name is Damien, begins to write something on his wax tablet, then slides it toward you. You glance down, he's drawn a goat. Wearing sandals. Holding a scroll that says, "I taught Plato." You smother a laugh. It escapes anyway. A brief wheeze. Half cough, half rebellion. Minox stops mid-sentence. His head swivels. You look down. So does Damien. You are both innocents and bad wax tablets. The moment passes. He continues. You breathe next. He assigns. A speaking exercise. You're to stand. Persuade the class that figs are better than olives. He says it's a test of ethos, pathos, and logos. You think it's a test of humiliation endurance. You stammer. You mention texture, then sweetness, then completely lose the thread and begin talking about a goat. You once met who ate figs from your hand? There is silence. Then applause. Not. From everyone, just a few. Damien claps once, dryly. Minox smiles, misreading your performance as intentional. A creative speaker, he says. You sit down. Your heart is pounding. Your face is warm. Your wax tablet is sweaty. You glance again. At Damien, he nods. A second drawing appears a moment later, this time a goat bowing dramatically. You smile. It's small, but it's something. A rebellion, not in fire or force, but in goats and glances. A refusal to believe that louder means wiser. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. It's hot today. Hotter than usual. It's the kind of hot that makes ink dry before it lands on the page, and wax goes soft just from your proximity. Even the flies look tired. Minox is sweating. Not that he'll admit it. He gestures furiously toward the wall, where a large scroll has been unrolled and pinned flat. The scroll is titled The Hierarchy of Ideas, and it takes up the entire wall. Like a philosophical invasion, you stare at it. There are circles. There are arrows. One section just says justice in huge letters with a drawing of what might be a loaf of bread or a sandal with ambition. The teacher begins to explain. His voice booms. His gestures sharpen. You brace yourself against the floor. He's speaking of ideals now, how everything in the world is a reflection of a higher, perfect form. Bread is never just bread. A chair is never just a chair. You, apparently, are not even properly yourself. You raise a hand. Why? You don't know? A moment of weakness, or hope, or summed. Sees you, yes, says dramatically. You hesitate. You hesitate then. If the ideal of a goat is perfect, does that mean all real goats are disappointing? Silence. He blinks. The class blinks. Then he says, that is beside the point. But the damage is done. Damien snorts. Another student drops his stylus from trying too hard not to laugh. Someone coughs in rhythm. The dog, who returned again today, yawns as if on cue. Minox recovers. He dives back into his scroll. But now everything feels less sharp, less certain. The scroll curls at the corners, as if it too is reconsidering its ideals. The lecture continues. You try to follow. There's something about ideal justice and universal beauty in a triangle that exists. It's nowhere but is somehow more real than your sandals. You look at your sandals. One is missing a strap. The other smells faintly of fish oil. If that's not reality, you don't know what is. Minox thunders on. The scroll behind him detaches slightly. The edge droops. It flaps lazily in the breeze, like an unimpressed eyebrow. You smile, small. Secret philosophy is a strange place. Sometimes, even scrolls get tired of being certain. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. Today is debate day. You didn't know that until this morning? When Minox stormed into the schoolhouse, waving to scrolls and declaring, "Let the minds clash like thunder on the mountain," you had hoped for a normal day. Maybe a discussion on the ethics of lending sandals or weather-boiled turnips could be considered a punishment. Instead, you're handed a wax tablet with the word proposition scrawled across the top and told you'll be debating a fellow student on the role of fate versus free will, which is unfortunate because you barely believe in either. And you're still recovering from the sandal blister of yesterday. Your opponent is Diodoros. He's tall, confident, and has a chin that seems to have studied rhetoric independently. He smiles like someone who has never lost a wax tablet. Minox assigns, "You fate." You would have preferred olives. The debate begins. Diodoro steps forward first. He launches into a speech so polished it probably rehearsed itself overnight. He talks about agency, choice, the power of the will, all while gesturing like a man offering discounted Campri at a market stall. The class applauds. Then it's your turn. You step up. You take a breath, and you begin. Imagine a goat. The class leans in. Minox leans back. You tell them about the goat. One that wakes up every day thinking it will visit the stream, but instead ends up trapped in the vegetable cart. No matter how many choices it thinks it has, it ends up in the same cabbage patch. Was that free will, you ask? Or the illusion of choice in a world ruled by cabbage? There is silence. Then, laughter. Not mockery. Actual laughter. Damien claps once. The dog barks. Minox, however, looks as if someone just insulted logic directly to its face. No more goats, he says. You shrug. The goat analogy stands. Minox starts posing rhetorical questions now. Rapid fire is not freedom merely the awareness of limitation? You blink. Are we not shackled by the very ideas we hold sacred? You blink again. Can a mind be free if it chooses to be bound? You nod slowly. He doesn't want answers. You realize this. These are not questions. They are dramatic flourishes. With punctuation, the debate ends with a small lecture. A warning against philosophical frivolity. Reminder that education is a serious endeavor. You return to your seat. Diodoros looks smug. You look at your wax tablet. You draw a goat, wearing shackles made of cabbage. It happens without fanfare. No loud entrance. No drumbeat. Just a door hinge sighing in protest, as if it, too, has grown weary of Minox shouting. You don't notice him at first? You're focused on the smudge forming on your wax tablet. A faint fingerprint that's somehow multiplying, and Minox is mid-rant, extolling the virtues of projecting one's ethos through sustained vocal command. He's using the word morality like it's a hunderclap. And then the room shifts, not physically, not a tremor, it's just a stillness. It's like thought itself held its breath. You turn, he's standing in the doorway. Fill-in, same. Frayed brown robe. Same sandals that look like they've walked across 5 lifetimes and taken notes about each one. He's holding a reed stylus that might be chewing him rather than the other way around. He doesn't speak right away. Just gazes into the classroom like he's trying to remember what it used to be, or what it still could be. Minox pauses mid-stride. His foot hovers in the air a moment longer than necessary. A scroll under his arm unrolls itself slowly, defeated by gravity and possibly symbolism. Someone near the front row coughs. The dog, once again curled by the wall, lifts its head and stares, ears twitching. Few students straighten reflexively, unsure if this is part of the lesson or a test in metaphysics. Then, softly, softer than anyone has spoken in weeks, Fill-in says, "Does the soul need a voice? Or only an ear?" It's not a question designed to be answered. Not today. Maybe not ever. Minox exhales through his nose. Sharply, the way someone might after tasting a spoiled olive. "The soul," he replies, voice rising just enough, "needs structure, direction, and volume." Fill-in doesn't argue, doesn't even blink. He simply nods once, not in agreement, but perhaps in acknowledgement. The way a man might nod at the sea before stepping away from it. His gaze drifts across the room, at the scrolls, the wax tablets, the boys with ink-stained fingers and bent necks, then finally, at you. Not long, just enough. "Still thinking?" he asks. You nod. He smiles barely, the kind of smile that folds into itself, on no larger than a breath, and then he's gone. No dramatic exit. No words trailing after him like banners, just a soft squeak of sandals and the sound of silence. Returning to where it was once welcome, Minox claps his hands. Once loud, sharp. "Back to the lesson," says voice a touch more strained than usual. He slaps the nearest scroll against the desk for emphasis. The dog lies back down, but something is different now. Maybe it's the air. Maybe it's your chest. Maybe it's just the memory of a quiet man who once said thinking takes time. Time takes patience. You look down at your wax tablet. You write, yes? Still thinking? And beside it, for no clear reason, you draw a goat. Not a loud goat, not a clever goat, just a goat quietly standing in the corner, watching everything. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. There comes a day in every schoolhouse when it all starts to blur. The scrolls, the shouting, the endless diagrams that promise clarity, but deliver only more ink stains and arguments about triangles. You've been writing for what feels like most of your life. Your wrist is sore, your stylus is dull, and your wax tablet is beginning to resemble a battlefield where grammar goes to die. Minox is explaining the proper structure of persuasive speech again. This is the 3rd time this week, or possibly the 5th time doesn't behave properly inside this room anymore. It stretches in places, contracts in others. Like an overcooked noodle, he writes on the wall with chalk, not lines, not points, but loops, swirls, dramatic arrows that spiral into words like assertion and impact. You're not sure if it's a rhetorical strategy or a weather pattern. You glance at Damien. He's scratching something into his wax, then quickly erasing it. You catch a glimpse before it disappears, a small drawing of Minox riding a chicken, labeled Pathos. You nearly snort, but you contain it. Barely outside, someone shouting about stolen grapes. A cartwheel creaks. A donkey sneezes with conviction. Inside, Minox continues. Remember, he booms, your words must strike like thunder or be forgotten like dust. He slams his stylus for emphasis. It snaps. Pieces fly. One lands. Near your sandal, you do not move. You are very still, like someone waiting to see if the gods noticed. He doesn't pause. Just grabs another stylus. From where you don't know, the man is a walking stationery shop. Begin your speeches with force, he says. Dominate the room. Let your opponent feel your intellect before you say a single word. You consider this, then wonder, is that still intellect? Or is it just volume? You look at your notes. You've written the word thunder 4 times in a row. Below it, loud equals true. You don't remember writing that? The boy in front of you has started muttering the lesson to himself, softly, repetitively. It's unclear if he's studying or slowly unraveling. It's possibly both. The wax on your tablet begins to smear again. It's too warm, or your hand is, or both. The word logic becomes lobic, and you stare at it longer than necessary, wondering if maybe that's a word too. Minox begins assigning practice speeches. Topics range from the importance of civic virtue to the superiority of goats over sheep, which you suspect is a subtle dig at you. You are paired with Dio Deruz. Again, you begin to argue, but he interrupts immediately, with flair, with projection. With teeth, you say 1 sentence. He says 3. You raise a point. He raises both hands and declares, your premise is void. You blink. The teacher applauds him. You sit down. You write the words, I misfill, then erase them. Then write them again, and beside it, without thinking, a single olive, not a tree, not a branch, just one quiet olive. Sitting still, you stare at it for the rest of the lesson. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. There's no warning, no polite announcement, no lead-up. Just Minox walking in with a stack of wax tablets under one arm and a look on his face like he's about to pronounce someone guilty of a philosophical crime. Pop test, he declares. The room groans. You groan quietly. Because groaning too loudly might get you assigned an essay on the virtue of silence. A tablet is dropped in front of you. Still warm from the sun, it smells faintly of charcoal and anxiety. 3 questions, Minox says. Answer them fully, with reasoning, examples, and force. Force, is that a new form of grammar? He begins to dictate. Question 1. Is truth, and can it be known? You stare at your tablet. A bee buzzes somewhere near your left ear. The wax glistens. The stylus in your hand feels heavier than it should, as if it's filled with the weight of every half-thought you've ever abandoned. You write 1 word, possibly, then immediately scratch it out. Too vague, too cowardly, too... Fill in. Question 2. Describe a moment where reason must triumph over emotion. You think of yesterday? Diodoros shouting you into rhetorical submission while you tried to explain the emotional significance of figs. You consider writing that down? You don't. Instead, you describe a goat. You don't mean to. It just happens. Before you know it, you've written a full paragraph about a goat who resisted temptation to eat fermented turnips because it had learned, through hard experience, that such actions lead to regret. You pause. Read it over. You cannot decide if it's metaphor or madness. Question 3. Which is more important in a democracy, clarity or conviction? You chew your lip. You begin to write about clarity, and scratch it out and write about conviction. Then realize you've written conviction. Stare at the word for a long time, it seems. Accurate. Your tablet is now a maze of thoughts, crossouts, and half-baked metaphors. It looks like someone tried to illustrate a dream and gave up halfway through. The stylus slips from your hand. You pick it up. It's sticky. Time's up. Minox walks around collecting tablets like he's harvesting regrets. He lifts yours, frowns slightly, then moves on. You stare at your now empty lap. It feels colder. Or maybe you do. Damien leans over. It's on his tablet in tidy wax strokes. He has written, "What is truth?" Answer. "Not this class," you snort. Minox hears. You are assigned an additional question to answer before tomorrow. Define. Discipline without using metaphors or goats? You sigh. You nod. You begin mentally preparing your answer. It starts against your will, with an image of a very disciplined goat refusing to speak. It ends as loudly as it began. Minox storms in, scrolls tucked under each arm, chest puffed with the confidence of a man who believes noise equals knowledge. He declares today's topic with such force that it knocks a stylus off someone's tablet. The future of the Republic, he booms. You're not sure what Republic he's referring to, but you suspect it has very little to do with students who have gone an entire week without comprehending a single diagram. He begins pacing. He's done this before, but today the rhythm is erratic, like his sandals are chasing ideas he hasn't quite caught. This, boys, he says, jabbing the air with a scroll, is the final proof that our teachings have succeeded. You will deliver speeches, long ones. From memory, the room groans in unison. Even the dog whines and relocates to the shade. You are not. Ready? No one is ready, but Minox is already calling names. Diodoros goes first, of course. He speaks of virtue and governance and collective will with the swagger of a fish vendor selling philosophical eels. He waves his arms. He shouts about justice. He mentions goats once, but with disdain. Then it's your turn. You rise, slowly, like a reluctant oracle preparing to disappoint a small crowd. You speak, the words come out not loudly. It's not perfectly, but they come. Do you talk about choices? You talk about small things. You talk somehow about silence. There are a few coughs. One small laugh. Minox squints. You sit back down, heart racing like a cart pulled by poorly trained sheep. He says nothing. The lesson continues, but the pace is off. Minox is distracted. His scrolls fall once, twice. One hits his sandal, and he mutters something about the weight of wisdom under his breath. Then, suddenly as it began, the day is over. He claps his hands, dismisses everyone. No speeches, no closing line. He simply gathers his scrolls, all bent and stained, and walks out the door. The room is quiet, truly quiet. Even the dog seems confused. You stay a moment longer, as does Damien. You both sit there, staring at the space where noise used to be. Eventually, someone whispers, "Do you think he's gone?" Another answers, "I think he forgot to say goodbye." You write on your wax tablet. Sometimes silence teaches better. Then you draw fill-in. It's just the back of his head, slightly hunched, half turned, as if about to say something he never was quite said. You don't draw. Men elked, not because you dislike him, but because he's already fading like an echo shouted to. Many times into the same room. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. The desks weren't. Always desks. Once they were benches. Before that, they were planks. Before that, they might have been doors. It's hard to tell. They've been painted, scraped, scorched, and repurposed so many times they've lost track of their original intentions. You run your fingers across one of them now. It's pitted, splintered, and etched with 1,000 stories no one ever asked for. Somewhere beneath the layers of wax and chalk dust is a name, Theokritos. It's been carved deeply, proudly, probably by Theokritos himself, or by someone who admired him or wanted him to trip on a rock. Next to it, an image. 2 stick figures, one of them holding what appears to be a scroll and hitting the other. Over the head with it, you stare, you nod. You understand. There are no teachers here to stop you from noticing. No monox, no phylone. Just this half-lit corner of the academy and a handful of empty desks, silent and scratched like tree bark. During a long, boring sermon, you trace another carving. It simply reads, "Math is a lie." Underneath that, "No, you're a lie." Then, your mother's a syllogism. You blink, you smile. You make a mental note to ask someone later what that insult actually means. You sit. This isn't your usual spot. It's too far back, too close to the wall. But it called to you, maybe because the leg wobbles like it's trying to escape. Or maybe because someone once carved it perfectly, round olive into the top right corner, gave it a face. You reach into the grooves. Your fingers find more than you expect. Initials, doodles, a crude drawing of a donkey with eyebrows. And something that may be either a fig or a failed attempt at drawing Socrates' head. It all feels oddly alive. Not sacred. Not reverent, just real. These scratches weren't made in boredom. Not only boredom, they were made by hands that needed to say something, to leave a mark. Even if it was a goat with wings and an unfortunate expression, you lean forward. You carve gently into the wood. Not a name, not a word, just a small symbol, an olive. Again, your own. Not for glory. It's not for future historians, but because the desk was watching and waiting. Asterisk, asterisk, you're back in the same seat. Back corner, chipped edge, leg still wobbles like it's had one too many philosophical crises. The olive you carved yesterday is still there. Its tiny face now partially smudged from someone resting a scroll on top of it. This morning, you discover something new, just below the edge of the desk, so faint it could almost be missed, is a small inscription. 3 words, each carved with the hesitancy of someone trying not to get caught. Plato is boring. You stare at it, then you laugh, not loudly, not disrespectfully. Just enough to make your stomach shake and your stylus slip off your lap. Who wrote it, you'll never know. But it's clear someone, at some point, found the theory of forms less enlightening than advertised. Just beneath it, another carving fainter rushed reads, "So is Demetrios." Then, in a different hand, messier, more desperate, Demetrios is Plato. It seems a miniature war was waged here, not with weapons, but with crude lines and passive-aggressive philosophy. You find a doodle. A donkey again, no surprise. But this one has wings, 3 scrolls tied to its tail, and what appears to be a laurel wreath on its head. The caption, Socrates' secret form. You blink. You try to picture Socrates as a winged donkey. Somehow, it works. Somehow, it explains a lot. More carvings. One declares, Eudoxus smells like turnips. Another, truth is like cheese, aged, and often moldy. Then, with exaggerated drama, etched diagonally across the grain of the wood, I died during. This lecture, you reach down and feel the words with your fingertips. The grooves are shallow, as if carved by someone trying to appear calm while internally screaming. You smile. There's something comforting in this strange, a rebellious chorus from across the decades. These weren't the clean marble benches of imagined Athens, with wise men nodding in rhythmic agreement. These were desks scratched into by boys with runny noses and complicated thoughts, trying to survive one more hour of someone shouting about geometry. You lean closer and notice a final line tucked beneath the corner. If you read this, the goat has already seen you. You glance up. The goat isn't here, of course. But just for a moment, you feel watched. You scratch a reply beneath it. Tell the goat I understand. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. It begins with a simple act, moving a stack of forgotten scrolls from one desk to another. Most of them crumble at the edges, leaving behind trails of dust and knowledge no one asked for. Beneath them, nestled beside what might once have been a piece of flatbread, now a fossilized triangle of something too hard to eat and too mysterious to name, lies a wax tablet unlike the others. This one is darker. Its corners are chipped, uneven, like they've been chewed by time or by someone extremely nervous. The wax has a strange sheen to it, like candlelight caught in a bad mood. You lift it, and it's heavier than it ought to be. Not dramatically, but enough to make. You suspicious of its past? There's a faint smell, hard to place. Slightly sour, almost vinegary. Maybe someone tried to clean it once with desperation and whatever liquid was nearby. Maybe it's just haunted. You tilt it gently, and faint marks reveal themselves beneath the dull gloss. At first they seem accidental pressure lines from years of use, maybe. But then you notice the pattern. A circle. 2 dots. A crooked mouth. Downturneed. A face, not an expressive one. It's just wide, vaguely alert, and deeply unimpressed. Beneath it, carved faintly, but unmistakably, this tablet is cursed. You pause, then flip it over. More lines. More warnings. Some light-hearted, some less so. Do not write here. I said don't. Seriously, it's still here.
Here?
Thumb resting against the edge begins to itch. You try to ignore it, but it insists. Not with pain, just presence. Like a memory, your skin hasn't quite finished forming. You take out your stylus. Slowly, carefully. You don't plan to write. Just tap the tip presses into the wax. A small flake breaks loose, sharp-edged, slightly tacky, and smelling faintly of failure. You lift the stylus again. The wax seems to shift, not dramatically, not physically, just enough to make you question if it always looked like that. You write one word, hello? Tap. The wax responds by dimpling, not melting, not breaking. Reacting like a cat flattening its ears. You set the tablet down, a little more abruptly than intended, and immediately regret both your curiosity and your optimism beneath it. Scratched into the desk, someone else has left a note. Heron was here. He failed rhetoric. Now he haunts wax. You glance back at the tablet. Its surface has gone strangely calm, like a pond that swallowed something and doesn't plan to tell anyone about it. You return it to its resting place. Beneath the scrolls, and fossil bread, like sealing it into a tomb made of neglect. Before leaving, you whisper goodbye, Heron. You don't expect an answer. But as you walk away, the itch in your thumb eases. Not entirely, but enough to make you think you've passed some kind of test. One carved in layers of wax and warning, and written by boys who learned that sometimes the things that refuse to be erased are the ones that write back. You weren't looking for greatness. We're looking for somewhere to sit. It was too late in the day for ambition. Your wax tablet was already streaked with thumb smudges and regret, and your tunic had begun that slow transformation into a second skin, soaked with sun and chalk dust. You passed the first bench, full, the second broken, the third occupied by a boy who was clearly either asleep or in the process of inventing a new form of despair. So you ended up here, back, corner, carved leg. Seat slightly sloped, as if trying to slide you into deeper thought or just off the edge altogether. And here, under the desk lip, where fingers nervously go during long lectures, you feel it, a carving, not the usual kind, not Plato stinks or figs rule, though those are nearby. This one's careful, curved, notched with intention. You slide your fingers along the line. An image, a face, but not just any face. This one has proportions. Real ones. A chin you could place a cup on, cheekbones sharp enough to slice olives. The nose, oh, the nose, a glorious sprawling, quelling miracle of geometry and vanity. You stare? This is no amateur doodle. This is a miniature monument. You've seen less detail on official busts. And beneath it, in cramped script, Socrates not that one. You snort. Then realize it's loud enough to draw glances, so you convert it into a polite cough. Whoever. This artist was... They weren't mocking. This is admiration, reverence even, possibly envy. There's a certain tenderness in the way the nose curls. It's like a wave cresting dramatically on a very well-read shore. You keep looking next to it, smaller. Faster lines, a side profile, less dignified, slightly cross-eyed, nose significantly shorter. No label underneath it. Manon? Ah, a rivalry, the great Socrates? Not that one? And the tragically nosed Manon. Locked forever in the quiet duel of wax and wit, Someone else has weighed in further down. The bench. I kissed men in scroll and got bored, Socrates once. Stared at a cloud and learned Latin. You don't correct the historical timeline? You're too amused? You add nothing? Not yet? It feels wrong to interfere. These aren't jokes. They're tiny debates, still warm with adolescent absurdity and competitive affection. Instead, you lean back. The bench wobbles, the carving waits. You stare at the nose again, marveling at how something so ridiculous can feel so meaningful, a monument, not to the greatness of Socrates, not that one, but to the undeniable urge of boys in classrooms to carve each other's faces into whatever surface endures. Asterisk, asterisk. It begins with the usual ritual of wiping down your tablet, an attempt to make it feel new again, even though you know the wax is too old, too used, too full of ghostly residue to ever really return to blankness. You rub it with the edge of your tunic, now stiff with repeated cleaning, chalk dust, and the faint smell of dried olives. A spot refuses to fade, no matter how many times you press your sleeve against it. You lean closer, tilting the tablet, to catch the shifting sunlight that sneaks in through the cracks in the wooden shutters, and then you see it. Not a stain, not a crack. A word faint, barely visible unless you're specifically squinting at it with the patience of someone avoiding the lesson currently being shouted about. Verb declensions. Just 2 words. Pressed into the wax as if the writer had barely dared to. Apply pressure. Still here? No name, no flourish, no punctuation. It's just a quiet question. Sitting in the corner of the tablet like a guest who arrived late and didn't want to interrupt you. Hesitate. Stylus poised. Then you answer yes. You. Don't know why you write it. It's not for anyone, probably. Maybe it's for you. Or maybe for someone who once sat in this same spot, wrestling with the same frustrations. The same confusion about passive participles and the correct way to conjugate to yawn in the optative mood. You sit back. The classroom buzzes. On around you, sandals scraping the floor, someone sniffling in the back. The teacher still arguing with himself about whether justice should be diagrammed or just accepted. But you feel different now. Like you've joined a conversation that began long before you and might not end for centuries. Later, during a break between lectures, you glance at your tablet again, and there it is, a new line. This time in the upper corner, nearly disguised among older scratches, and the ghost of an ink blot from last week's vocabulary list. The handwriting is different, sharper, more cramped, almost anxious. Grammar test tomorrow. Save me, you grin. You have no idea who wrote it? No one's moved near your tablet all morning? Maybe you missed it before? Or maybe, and this feels oddly possible, the tablet decided it wanted to keep talking. You write beneath it. I can't even spell grammar, it's true. You've written it 3 ways on 3 separate days. None of them felt correct. Later that afternoon, a goat appears. You didn't draw it. It wasn't there during lunch. It's not a good goat. One leg is too long. Its ears are suspiciously shaped like figs. Its tongue sticks out, and it wears what looks like a scroll as a sort of ancient academic hat. It's awful. It's perfect. This isn't just graffiti anymore. This is a thread. A wax-licked chain of messages between students united by boredom, frustration, and the belief that learning should occasionally involve a badly drawn goat. You respond the only way that makes sense. You draw a fig then. Underneath it, you carve. We suffer in shifts, and somehow, you feel less alone. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. It begins with the stylus. Your favorite one? The one that's been chewed beyond recognition at one end and smooth as water-worn stone at the other, finally snaps. Not from drama. Not from some heroic ink-stained flourish mid-sentence. It simply breaks while you're adjusting your grip, as if it's had enough of this week's lectures and has decided to quietly retire. You stare at the pieces in your palm. One is jagged. The other has a tiny sliver of wax still clinging to its edge, like a last word that didn't make it onto the tablet. You sigh. Loud enough to draw 1 glance, then 2. Then, from the far edge of the room, a hand reaches out. Demian. He offers you a replacement stylus, slightly bent, slightly damp, and still marked with someone else's initials. You nod your thanks. and take it like a soldier being handed. The only remaining sword before a very silly war. That's when you notice it. The desk. Damien's desk. Covered edge to edge in marks, not just names. Not just idle scratches from restless hands, but a full organized system. Tiny symbols etched carefully across the wood like secret footnotes to an invisible lecture. You see an olive, a goat, a scroll, a sandal, and what you believe might be a turnip. Each appears in different combinations, some circled, others crossed out, with lines drawn between them like a network of hidden logic. You tap his desk. He glances over, smirks. Then subtly, without speaking, he drags the edge of his wax tablet toward yours. You meet him halfway. His tablet is full, not of notes. Not entirely, but symbols, messages, a system. Each mark means something. Boredom, agreement, protest, small victories. The whole coded language born from too many hours spent listening to Monox try to define ethical volume for the third time this week. You look down at your own tablet. Blank, not empty. Just silent. You carve a small fig, then add a sandal. You slide it toward him. He reads it, then adds a goat with wings and a single teardrop. You understand immediately. Same. That's how it begins. No speech. No plan. Just scratches. Traded between benches, scribbled at the edges of real assignments, tucked under lines about syllogisms and statecraft. You begin to see the marks everywhere, quiet resistance growing like mold in a storage amphora. A turnip beside a fig. This, lesson smells. Goat next to a scroll. He quoted Plato wrong again. A sandal beside a sandal. Walk out together after class. You're not alone anymore. You never were. The Academy's benches are covered in the tired, creative footprints of students who have found, over generations, that the best ideas aren't always loud. Sometimes they're scratched into the side of a desk, shared in symbols, and passed between hands like contraband wisdom. You add one final mark before class ends. An olive, simple, whole, balanced perfectly beside a cracked fig, Damien. The rebellion is not dramatic, it's just thoughtful and etched in wax. It wasn't supposed to be permanent. The scroll began like so many others, folded into fourths, smuggled beneath a tunic, written during the lulls between lectures. It was a simple project. Joke, really. A collection of all the symbols you and Damien had been carving into desks and tablets over the past week. Nothing official, nothing scholarly. Just a growing record of rebellion, scrawled in wax and then copied onto old parchment with a brush that shed more hairs than it applied ink. You kept it hidden mostly. Damos. Called it the Codex of Boredom. You preferred Scroll of Surviving. Monox, though that title didn't quite fit at the top, is too long, too obvious, so it stayed untitled. A rolled up mess of fig icons, goats with academic titles, sandals drawn mid-fleet, and an entire section labeled emotional turnips. An index. There was even a goat named Soccer Goat, who wore a laurel wreath and questioned the meaning of bleeding. Each student who joined your quiet alliance added a symbol. One boy carved a cracked amphora, another scratched a sandal stuck in mud. Someone, possibly several someones, kept drawing, increasingly unsettling olives with eyes, and it was all fine until Linos got involved. Linos was not subtle. He was not discreet. Was the kind of boy who believed volume proved belief and that any joke, if repeated loudly enough, became wisdom. He added to the scroll during class, during the middle of a reading, while Monox paced 3 feet away, and he didn't just draw. He labeled named names, signed symbols to real teachers. His fig next to Tutor Demetrios came with an arrow and the word snores. The ink hadn't even dried before he waved it in the air to show someone. Else, you knew it was over before it started. The scroll was confiscated, of course, taken midloff. Monox didn't yell. He didn't scold, and rolled it, examined it for a very long time, and then folded it again, tucked it under his arm, and continued with the lesson on statehood and civic duty as if nothing had happened that made it worse. Linos got extra writing assignments. had to copy 10 speeches from memory and recite them backwards. Manok's idea of pedagogy, but you and Damien, you weren't punished. Not formally, but the scroll was never seen again. You checked the cabinet, the drawer, even the waste pile behind the amphora racks. Nothing. It was gone, erased. And yet a week later, on the underside of your desk, someone had scratched a tiny symbol, barely visible, a goat, wearing a laurel crown, looking up. You didn't add it. Neither did Damien, but someone did. Someone still remembered, so you added a fig next to it, then a sandal, then the word soon. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. There's a corner of the academy no one sits in anymore. No one speaks of it, not directly. Not because it's cursed, though that rumor surfaces now and then, often from students who failed to many logic tests and need something external to blame. But because the bench near that far back wall is just wrong. It leans not physically, or not in any way gravity seems to recognize. The whole space leans, like the light bends differently there. Dust gathers faster. Chalk doesn't stick to the slate as long. When someone coughs, the echo never reaches that corner. Sound avoids it, like even noise is unsure of its footing. You didn't mean to sit there, you arrived late again. Your usual seat was taken. Damien shrugged helplessly as you scanned the room for options. The only empty spot was beside the wall, the desk no one touched unless truly desperate. And today, you were. You slide into the seat and feel the change immediately. The wood is smoother than expected, not new smooth, but worn down smooth. Like water has passed over it for years, wearing away splinters and meaning alike. There are no visible carvings, no figs, no goats. No initials. That's what feels strange. Every desk has something. A mark, a notch, a doodle. But this one is blank. Utterly blank. You run your fingers along its edge, then you hear it. A faint whisper. Not a voice. Not words. Just the sensation of sound. Like someone exhaling behind a thick curtain. A brush of breath that doesn't reach the skin but still registers somewhere between the ears and the spine. You freeze. Then, slowly, you check beneath the desk. There's a carving one. Just one. A name. Telios. The letters are exact, carved with precision. Not boredom. The edges are clean, the lines deliberate, as if whoever made them wanted the name to last longer than anything else in this room. You don't know who Telios was. You've never heard the name called during roll. But beside the carving tucked, under the wood where fingers might have rested, is another mark. A small spiral, barely the size of a thumbprint. It looks ancient, ceremonial, like something a priest might hide in plain sight. You press your thumb into it. The desk doesn't move, but something changes. A breeze, maybe. A feeling. A pressure behind your eyes. Nothing sharp. Just enough to make you wonder if someone sat here so long, thought so hard, that they left behind not just scratches, but presence. You sit back. You write nothing. But when class ends, and everyone files out, you stay behind just a moment longer. And you whisper, almost joking, but not quite. Still here? The silence that follows isn't empty. It feels like agreement. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. It begins with a fig, not a real one, not even a particularly well-drawn one, just a scratched, slightly oval shape carved into the desk where Minox normally keeps his chalk. Right near the corner, he obsessively wipes down before every lecture as if he's terrified of catching ideas from someone else. The fig is smiling wickedly underneath it. The words, "The Republic of Boredom lives." It's tiny. Tucked just beside a chalk stain that never fully disappears no matter how many times he scrubs it. Most students wouldn't even notice, but Minox does. Does he? His face stiffens when he finds it. He doesn't speak. He doesn't shout. He just stares at the carving like it personally insulted his mother and misquoted Aristotle in the same sentence. The next day, everything changes. He swaps all the desks. Not just rearranges them, swaps them. The benches from the front are moved to the back. The side desks are placed in the center. Your desk, yours, the one with the goat wearing a scroll, is now 2 rows over and inhabited by a boy named Petros, who once ate ink on a dare. You sit in his old place now, a desk that smells faintly of fish oil and anxiety. Every time you breathe, the carvings here are all angry, deep slashes, a cracked sandal, and the word WHY repeated 4 times in gradually larger letters. The rebellion is in disarray. Symbols no longer line up. Conversations in wax have been interrupted mid-sentence. Damien ends up with a desk that says, "I am turnip," in 3 languages, and nothing else. You feel like a poet who's lost their metaphor. You keep reaching for memories that aren't in this wood, and yet, you adapt. Slowly, you carve a message. Desk stolen. Memory missing. We persist. A day later, someone responds, "Let the desks migrate. The fig endures."
Right.
Then another. The Republic lives. Just 2 rows to the left. Even Petros, to your surprise, begins to draw. You catch him etching a sandal with a suspicious expression. He glances up when he notices you watching. He says nothing. Just nods, as if to say, "I didn't ask for this, but I understand. It's not the same. But it's something." The message continues through new desks, new scratches, and displaced turnips. Even the whisper corner desk, the haunted one, receives its first fresh mark in months, a fig with a crown, tiny and defiant, but drawn with a trembling hand. You realize then the Republic of Boredom was never tied to a desk. It was never about wax or wood or the perfect goat drawing. It was about survival and humor and finding something to carve, even when the furniture changes. It's your last day in this room. You don't know it yet, not exactly, but the season is shifting, and Minox has begun talking about advancement and placement. In that ominous tone he reserves for moments when he wants you to feel both proud and vaguely threatened. A new group of students will arrive soon. The benches will be scrubbed, the desks realigned, the wax tablets reissued, and the rebellion, your rebellion, will either endure or it won't. You arrive early. The room smells of stale chalk, warm wood, and uncertainty. Someone's left their scroll half enrolled near the front, revealing a phrase you can't fully read except for the word virtue, which always feels heavier than it should. The morning sun creeps across the floor slowly, reluctantly, like it's unsure it should be illuminating this place at all. You return to your desk, your new desk. Technically, but by now it's earned the title. You run your fingers across the grain, the grooves, the familiar scuffs and ridges that you know better than some of your cousins. Your olive is still there. So is the goat. The one with the scroll hat, an existential dread. You sit, you carve. One final message, not because you expect anyone to find it, not because you're trying to make history, but because the bench is listening. It always has. You carve slowly, carefully, so the message lands the way you mean it to. You were here. I was too. We tried. You sit back. You think about all the desks, all the scribbles, all the little acts of resistance, the fig wars, the desk swap, the haunted whispers, the bad drawings that somehow carried more meaning than entire orations then. Just before the others arrive, you stand. You move to the old whispering bench, the one in the back. The one no one sits at, still slightly slanted, still echo-proof. You run your hand beneath the edge, where Telios carved his name long ago. The spiral is still there, still faintly warm, or maybe you're imagining that. You press your thumb. To it once more, but this time, there's no whisper. It's just a hush. You don't carve anything new. That spot doesn't need more marks. You turn to go at the door. You look back and you realize they'll repaint the benches. They'll replace the tablets. They'll assign new lessons and draw new diagrams. But they won't ever reach all of it. Not the goat under the desk. Not the phrase carved inside the leg. Not the turnip hidden. Beneath the drawer lip, these things endure. Not because they were meant to, but because someone bothered. Asterisk, asterisk, your feet don't touch the floor. Not because you're small, though you are, but because the stool is too high, the chair is too polished, the room to clean. You sit in a private study designed for someone twice your size, surrounded by scrolls no one else is allowed to borrow. Reciting lines you barely understand to a man paid not to care whether you do. This is what education looks like when your father can afford silence. The room is shaded. Purposefully, curtains drawn to block distractions. The air smells of olive oil and expensive ink, that particular sharpness that reminds you of dried figs and responsibility. Your tutor Antagoras clears his throat for the 5th time this hour. That's how he signals disappointment. Not. With words, with damp nasal percussion, you read from a scroll written just for you. It's beautifully inked, bound in fine leather, the title embossed in gold leaf. You hate it. The lesson today is on virtues again. You already know the list. Courage, moderation, justice, wisdom. They follow you like well-dressed dogs. Antagoras corrects your pronunciation even when you say it right. He does not blink. You suspect he only sleeps while standing, like a particularly judgmental statue. Outside, you can hear the market barely. Just the faint clatter of sandals and distant arguments about fish. You envy them. You imagine trading places with the boy shouting about olives 2 streets over. You could carry things, get sunburned, eat something dropped on the ground without being asked about moderation. But no, you're here. In the room with the scrolls, the stool that creaks when you fidget, and the tutor who clears his throat like he's trying to summon a different student. You look down. The scroll has smudged, slightly, probably. From your thumb the ink blurs, around the word temperance, which feels appropriate. You're not sure you're supposed to enjoy this, but you're certain you don't. Repeat the final phrase, Antagoras says. You do, mechanically, with just enough enthusiasm too. Avoid further throat clearing. He nods once, then adjusts his robe. You suspect this is how he experiences joy. You sigh internally. Of course, external sighing would result in a short speech about composure. This is learning alone, not quieter, just lonelier. Each scroll, a wall. Each word, a rule. And the only desk graffiti is your own soft wish for noise. Asterisk, asterisk, the scrolls are lined up like guards, each one labeled, numbered, tied with ribbon. Their edges curled with age, but not from use, from being untouched, from waiting too long in one place. They line the back wall of your private study, stacked on neat wooden shelves your father had imported from the Peloponnese. He thought. You'd like the symmetry. You don't. You have memorized their order by accident. Number 12 contains speeches by Lysias, which you've read 6 times and understood maybe once. Number 7 is your copy of Plato's Republic, with the margin notes. Already filled in by your previous tutor who liked to debate with himself more than with you. Number 3 is just blank parchment, stored there to remind you that someday you'll be trusted to write your own thoughts. Someday has not yet arrived. The tutor today is not Antagoras, but someone new. Antagoras had a cough, or said he did. Maybe he just reached his limit with your sighing. This new one, Diocles, is younger, better shaven, and smells faintly of beeswax. You suspect it's from the pomade in his hair.
Ow.
He smiles more. That's suspicious. He begins by asking questions. Not rhetorical ones, not scripted ones, real ones. What does justice mean to you? He says, sitting across from you like a man who believes chairs should creak when leaned into. You freeze. You've never been asked that, you start to answer, but the words trip. They fumble like they've never had to walk on their own. You're used to repeating, reciting, not constructing. He waits, smiles again. You try. It's doing what's right. A nod. And what if 2 people disagree on what's right? This is a trap. You're sure of it. You glance toward the scroll shelf, hoping number 12 has the answer. Or maybe number 3, blank as it is, will forgive you for writing, I don't know. Eventually you say, then they probably debate. Diocles laughs, not mockingly, genuinely. It's strange. The sound feels like it doesn't belong in this room, like it cracks something in the plaster. You realize this is the first time. You've spoken more than 3 sentences in a row. This week the room feels wider, but no less lonely. Because there's still no one to whisper to. No other student to nudge when the tutor misquotes Aristotle. No one to pass olives to under the desk. No graffiti under the table. Just polished wood, rubbed smooth from generations of elbows too respectful to rebel. You begin to envy not just the boys in the marketplace, but the ones in crowded schoolrooms, the ones who sit too close and breathe too loud and draw goats when they should be writing. You imagine yourself beside them, and for a moment you miss a life you've never had. Time in this room is not measured by the sun. The shutters are always drawn, the windows too high to see through. Your family says it keeps you focused, but you suspect it's so you won't know how long you've been trapped in here, breathing the same lecture air for hours. Instead, your days are measured by the hourglass. It sits at the corner of the desk, narrow, polished, constantly lying about how long a lesson will take. You used to count the grains. Now you just glance at it with the resigned loathing usually reserved for spoiled milk or unsolicited speeches. Diocles turns it again. The sand begins its slow descent, and with it your spirit. Today's topic is metaphors and political rhetoric. Specifically, whether comparing the state to a ship is a strong or lazy image. You don't care. You truly don't. But Diocles insists on exploring it in detail over multiple scrolls with references. So many references. Is the ruler, the rudder, he asks, waving his hand dramatically. You say nothing. You're too busy thinking about the orange on the plate beside you. It's not for you. It's for symbolism. He brought it in earlier, placed it carefully on a small saucer, and announced, "Today, we will peel back layers of ideas, of argument, of fruit." You thought he was joking? He was not. You've now spent nearly an hour listening to a man with shiny hair compare rhetorical structure to citrus. He gestured toward the pith and called it the connective tissue of persuasion. He removed a segment, held it up to the light, and said, like a well-supported sub-argument, translucent but structured. You nodded, because what else could you do? The orange now sits half-peeled, slightly drying, looking tired of this as well. Your wax tablet remains untouched. You haven't written anything down in 30 minutes. You've drawn a circle, then another, then a smaller one inside. The second. It looks like a sad amphora, or possibly a philosophical donut. Diocles hasn't noticed. He's quoting Isocrates now, as if the scrolls haven't done that already. His voice hums through the quiet like a beehive that no one dares poke. You glance at the hourglass again, still half full. Of course, there's a tickle in your throat. Not enough to justify coughing, but enough to remind you that your body wants to escape. Your foot taps the floor in a slow, metered rhythm. You're composing poetry in your head just to stay awake. It starts with, "The state is not a ship, my friend, it's just a soggy chair." It doesn't get better after that. At one point, Diocles asks a question and pauses. You nod vaguely. He continues. Another 5 minutes pass, or 5 centuries. When the sand finally runs out, he flips the glass again without looking. You nearly weep. The lesson continues. The orange wilts, and you consider carving your own scroll, not with arguments, but with shapes, a goat, a turnip, a chair tipping over. You don't, but you want to. Asterisk, asterisk, you don't notice the blot until your wrist slides through it. It's a fresh stain. Dark, glistening, defiant, and it's spread across the corner of your wax tablet like a declaration of war. You look at your palm. The ink has marked you, thin lines curling around your fingers like someone tried to draw vines and gave up halfway through. You don't know where it came from? You haven't used ink today. Not once. Your tutor is late. For once, gloriously, blessedly late. You sit in the quiet of your private study, stunned by the sound of nothing. No sandal slaps, no lectures about metaphorical navigation, no oranges slowly rotting into abstract learning devices. Just you, the ink, and the thick, sun-dulled silence of a room that feels strangely bigger, without supervision. You glance at the door. It's still ajar. You're not supposed to be alone in here for long, but the household is quiet. Maybe someone forgot. Maybe the scroll keeper misplaced the schedule. Or maybe, and this seems more likely, the universe is finally offering you a small rebellion of its own. So you do something unthinkable. You open scroll. Number 3. The blank one. The one no one has ever let you write on. The one your father insisted was for when you're ready. It creaks slightly as it unrolls, the parchment curling at the edges like it's surprised to be unsealed. You take a stylus and dip it into the ink you didn't bring. You write your name. Just your name. The ink blot spreads slightly. You stare at it. It doesn't look like your name. It looks like someone tried to spell you and ended up with a puddle. You try again. Beneath it, you write a sentence. The lesson today was silence. Then another. It spoke more clearly than anyone else. Your hand keeps moving. Words tumble out, slow at first, then faster. Brilliant, not polished, but yours. You write about how the scroll shelf stares like an audience of judges, how the wax tablet feels colder than it used to, how you sometimes dream of sitting in a room full of noise, never having to answer every question correctly. You fill half the parchment. You pause, and then, without thinking, you add a small doodle in the corner. A goat, wearing a scroll as a scarf. You've never drawn one before, but you've imagined them. It's from stories. From scribbles you've overheard the servants laugh about. The ones the street boys carve under benches when they think no one is looking. You smile, then draw a fig beside it, then a turnip. You place your stylus down gently. The door still hasn't opened. The lesson is yours today. Not assigned, not tested. It's just written. When Diocles finally arrives, he finds you seated with your hands folded, looking vaguely thoughtful, faintly smug. The scroll has been rolled up. Again, he doesn't ask, you don't explain, but the ink's still on your fingers. It says enough. Asterisk, asterisk. There's a noise in the courtyard. Not the usual rustle of robes, or the dry shuffle of your tutor's footsteps. This is louder. Scattered voices. Laugh. That doesn't sound like it's being swallowed by formality. Then the unmistakable sound of feet, bare ones slapping against stone. You peer through the shutter slats. Outside, a group of children, boys near your age, are being led by a thin, stooped man in a threadbare cloak and too much energy. For this time of day, you stop beneath the olive tree, and one of them immediately begins climbing it. You're horrified and jealous. Your tutor, for reasons unknown to you, is late again. Perhaps the gods have decided that today, too, belongs to silence and curiosity. Perhaps they've misplaced your name in the scroll of responsibilities. You take your wax tablet, step outside. You're not supposed to. But no one stops you. The sun hits you like an accusation. Warm, bright, real. Clutch the tablet tighter and approach the tree. The barefoot boy notices you first. He's got smudges on his elbows and a grin that looks permanent. You're the scroll boy, he says. You don't correct him. Another boy, seated cross-legged on the ground, is holding 2 stones. He offers you one. You accept it before thinking. Smooth, round, cold from the shade. They're playing a game. Not a game with rules that make sense. Not like logic puzzles or rhetorical duels, but a game where someone throws a stone. Someone chases it, and someone always ends up laughing. You watch, then join. Badly, you throw too hard. Chase too slow. You try to ask what the rules are, but the grinning boy just shrugs and says, "Don't lose the rock." You don't. You drop it once. But you don't lose it. Someone offers you a piece of bread. It's stale. Possibly older than the tree, but it tastes real. Not like virtue. Not like discipline. It's like crust and sun, and someone forgetting to be polite. You laugh, and no one writes it down. Eventually, the man with the too-thin cloak calls for the boys to gather. He's teaching something, you're not sure what. Doesn't use scrolls. Just gestures, questions, and stories that sound like riddles told by a fish vendor with an unusually philosophical bent. You sit down, you listen, not because you must, but because you want to. And in that moment, with your wax tablet abandoned, on a rock, your sandals gathering dust, and your fingers still smelling faintly of someone else's olive, you wonder if this is what learning is supposed to feel like. Not a test, not a chair, but a question you chase through sunlight. Holding a stone, trying not to drop it. You're told a guest is coming, not a relative, not a merchant, a philosopher. One of your father's acquaintances from the academy. He's brilliant, they say. He once debated 3 Spartans and made 2 of them cry. You're not sure if that's supposed to impress you? It doesn't. You're told to sit up straighter. You're told to wear the blue tunic, the itchy one that makes you feel like a formal fruit. And you're told to prepare an answer to the question, what is the nature of excellence? You don't even know what the nature of breakfast is half the time. The philosopher arrives mid-morning, all robes and sandals and the kind of beard that looks like it developed its own philosophies. He smiles like someone who hasn't smiled in weeks and is testing it out again. You stand when he enters, as instructed. He waves his hand at the gesture like it's an inconvenient breeze. Sit, he says. We're not at war. Yet, you think he begins talking, not in the voice of your tutor. It's not like Diocles or Antagoras. No slow-building lectures, no measured phrases. He talks like a man haggling over fish. It's fast, messy, oddly convincing. He picks up a fig from the fruit bowl, the centerpiece your mother had arranged to look philosophical, and bites it mid-sentence. You stare. No one is supposed to eat the centerpiece. Excellence, he says, chewing, is knowing what matters. You blink. That's it? He sees your confusion, laughs, picks up a second fig, offers it to you. You don't move. You expected more, he asks. You nod, slowly. Most do. He shrugs. That's why they never find it. You take the fig. You don't eat it. You hold it like a symbol. A very sticky, unrequested symbol. He leans back in the chair. Your chair. The one you're never allowed to slouch in, and places his feet on the side of the desk like a man who's conquered enough formality for one lifetime. Read me something, he says. You reach for your scroll. You read the first passage that doesn't mention civic virtue. It's clumsy. Your voice falters. You skip a line. But when you finish, he nods. Better than your tutor. You don't know how to respond. It feels like praise. But also like a curse. He leaves soon after, muttering something about olive prices and the decline of dialectic skill. You remain in the room, fig in hand, unsure whether you've just passed a test or been thoroughly mocked by a man who eats. Metaphors for breakfast. You sit back. You place the fig on the desk then. Without thinking, you draw a small goat beside it on your wax tablet. This one looks vaguely smug. You name him. Arete. Excellence. He's a terrible drawing. But he's yours. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. There is a silence beyond silence. Not the kind that follows a question. Not the kind that comes when a tutor pauses, waiting for you to remember a date, a name, a definition you've already forgotten. This silence is thicker, older. It fills the room like warm milk that's gone slightly sour, smooth, but unsettling. That's the silence today. No tutor arrives, no. Messages are delivered. Even the servant who usually places a small cup of watered wine on the corner of your desk forgets to come, or chooses not to. You're not sure which would be worse, so you sit. The study is still clean, painfully so. The scrolls on the shelf are perfectly aligned, like they've been pressed into obedience. Not a speck of dust, not a bent corner. It feels unnatural, like a room designed not to be lived in, but to be witnessed. The kind of place that makes you whisper, even when you're alone. You test your voice, just to be sure. You say hello. Echoes back to clearly the word sounds foreign in the room, out of place. It's like a sandal in a fruit bowl. You sigh. Then, because there's nothing else to do, you open the wax tablet. The surface is clean, unnaturally so. Your last drawing, the goat named Barete, has been wiped away. Though whether by servant or accident, you'll never know. You stare at the empty wax and feel something sour rise behind your ribs. You don't redraw. Him, instead, you carve a line, just one, then another, then you connect them. And you let your hand move, not to create letters, not to form meaning, but to see what happens. Curves, spirals, a square, a sandal, a scroll. Not beautiful. Not even. Clear, just marks, unstructured, purposeless, and yours. The hourglass on the shelf is still full. You haven't turned it. You don't plan to. Time today isn't measured in sand or scrolls, but in moments of stillness. In the way light moves slowly from one slat in the shutter to another. Eventually you hear footsteps, but they pass by. No, one enters. You wonder if they forgot you. You wonder if they remembered, decided that was enough. You carve again. This time words, nothing happened. Then, underneath it, that was the lesson. You close the tablet. Stand, stretch. The room doesn't change. But you do. You walk out without asking permission, without noting the time, without leaving a scroll open to indicate where you stopped. Outside. The world smells like olives and dust and sweat, and something that isn't silence. You don't look back. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. They warned you it would be different. Just a brief session, your father said, adjusting his sash as though bracing for war. We'll sit with the other boys. Just for a day. A gesture. A gesture to whom he didn't say. Possibly to a senator, possibly to the gods. Either way, the message was clear. Endure it. Don't embarrass anyone, especially him. So you're sent, not escorted, just gently directed by a servant who whispers directions like they're delivering secret poetry to the public academy courtyard. Not your courtyard. Not the private one with shaded benches, imported marble. Silence measured by the hourglass. No, this is a rectangle of dust and sun and sandal prints, worn so deep into the earth they might qualify as architectural features. The boys are already there. Some sit in loose groups. Others pace or lean or stretch their legs as if preparing for a physical event rather than a philosophical one. Take a seat at the edge. A low bench, splintered. Slightly sticky, though you refuse to consider what might have caused that. Your tunic clings in places it shouldn't. Your wax tablet, still pristine, rests on your lap like an awkward offering no one asked for. The tutor today is old, not dignified, dulled, old. Wrinkled like a raisin left in the sun, and with a voice that wheezes like a door with feelings. He begins the session with a question shouted over his shoulder, "What is justice when you are the one losing?" The boys answer without raising hands. Some call out, others grumble. One boy, perched on a nearby column base, mumbled something about olives being taxed unfairly, and three others laugh like it's the funniest thing they've heard in months. You don't laugh, you don't speak. You try to think of a good answer, but thinking takes time. This classroom does not wait. You finally raise your hand, no one notices. By the time your fingers are in the air, the conversation is already twisted. Into something else, a joke about Sparta, a rebuttal about sandals, a half-formed theory involving goats and river law. You lower your hand, your wax. The tablet remains blank. Someone glances at you. Not cruelly, just curiously. The kind of look you'd give a statue that just blinked. You feel something then, not embarrassment. It's not quite, but a heavy, clunky awareness of your own body, of your own presence. In your private lessons, you are observed, but never really. Seen. Here you are seen, but never really observed. It is a strange, cold balance. When the lesson ends, most of the boys scatter like sand kicked by a bored breeze. A few linger. One offers you a dried fig, you take it without a word. Bit boring, huh? He says. You nod. Better than yesterday, he adds. You nod again, and then, without warning, draws a tiny goat on the corner of your tablet. Just 2 lines and a curl for the tail. Before jogging off to join the others, you stare at it. It's terrible, but it's also proof. Proof that you were here, that you were not entirely invisible, that for just one dusty hour you were part of. A conversation you didn't quite understand, but desperately wanted to. You don't wipe the goat away. You leave it. You carry it home. You are dressed for dinner, not the regular sort. Not the evening meal where your family sits in varying degrees of politeness, avoiding each other behind olives and obligations. This is a special dinner, a private feast. Guests have been invited. Scholars, friends of your father. Men who pronounce syllables with theatrical precision and quote Plato the way some people recite family curses ritually, proudly and with a faint tone of personal grievance. The room smells of roasted garlic, lemon, and the faint, unignorable edge of ambition. You are not seated with the adults. Your place is at a side table, one step below the main conversation, but still visible enough to make you part of the arrangement, decorative included. Like a well-oiled statue meant to nod at the right moments. Your tutor is here, not Diocles, not Antagoras, but one of the ones in between. The forgettable. One with damp cuffs and a voice that cracks whenever he says the word ethos. He's seated near the end of the main table, smiling too much, nodding like his neck is hinged by flattery. You have been instructed not to speak, less spoken to. This is fine. You are very used to not speaking. The man beside your father is older, with a mouth like a folded napkin and a gaze that scans the table like he's checking for loose pebbles in his soup. He turns to you eventually, slowly, the theatrical pause of someone who wants the moment noted, and says, "Ah, the student." You nod. He asks what you're reading. You answer honestly, a little too honestly. You mention a passage from Demosthenes that confused you. The structure, the phrasing, part about the law seeming like both a weapon and a wound. You admit you didn't understand it. The silence that follows is not loud, but it is very full. Your father stiffens, very slightly, a shift in the air more than the body. The older man smiles not kindly, more like a craftsman pleased to find a flaw in something recently built. Not understanding is the first step, he says, if you have the second. You try to smile, but your teeth feel suddenly like pieces of someone else's puzzle. Another man across the table, younger, thinner, eager, offers a quote to fill the space. The conversation drifts. You are left in the shadow of your own answer. You realize you were not meant to be honest. You were meant to impress. The food arrives in portions too delicate to be comforting. Tiny birds curled on beds of herbs, eggs, dyed with saffron, bread soft enough to suggest that someone, somewhere, cares about your teeth. You chew politely. You do not taste much. Eventually, someone brings up Socrago at not by name, of course, but by idea. One of the guests jokes about the drawings those idle boys have been passing around in the academy. Goats with laurels. It's olives with expressions. Scrolls reimagined as togas. Everyone chuckles. Your father does not. You do not laugh. You want to, but you don't. Because they're not laughing with you. They're laughing at something you almost belonged to once, and suddenly you miss it. Not the goat, or the scroll, or even the rebellion. You miss being unimportant enough to draw without being noticed. Asterisk, asterisk, no one tells you it's your last lesson. There is no announcement, no ceremonial closing of the scrolls, no dramatic pronouncement of completion. The morning begins like all the other: stiff tunic, bitter olives at breakfast, the faint scrape of sandals in hallways that echo more than they should. You enter the study expecting the usual, an hourglass turned with unnecessary flair, scroll on virtue or logic, and a tutor who watches you like he's waiting for a better version of you to arrive. But the study is different today. There are no scrolls on the desk, just one, blank, rolled tight and tied with a pale ribbon that looks as if it's been reused too many times. It isn't labeled. That, more than anything, unnerves you. Everything here is labeled. Everything belongs in a place, has a function, follows a logic. This scroll is none of those things. Diocles is already seated when you enter. He looks tired, but not in the usual way. Not like he's slept poorly or read too long. More like someone who's been waiting to say something and has finally run out of ways to postpone it. He gestures toward the seat. You sit. Then he pushes the scroll toward you. "This one's for you," it says. You wait for more, for instruction, for expectation, for the usual careful scaffolding of phrases that will guide you into doing what's expected. But he doesn't offer any. He leans back. He folds his hands. And he waits. You untie the ribbon slowly, like it might snap. The scroll unrolls stiffly, creased from time and disuse. The parchment smells faintly of oil and old smoke. You reach for the inkwell, one of the few things still exactly where it always is, and dip your stylus. Nothing, you dip again. Stir gently. Still nothing, Diocles smiles, almost apologetically. It's not the ink, he says. Shh. The moment. You stare at the parchment, at the space where words should begin to form, where thoughts are supposed to live once they've decided on shape. But your hand doesn't move. You don't know what to write. Not because you have nothing to say, but because there's too much, all of it tangled. It's unsorted, unsanctioned. You think about the boys in the courtyard, about the goat drawings, about the old philosopher with fig on his beard. About that. One moment of laughter that felt like a gift. You think about the questions you asked that didn't get answered, and the ones you were too afraid to ask at all. You dip the stylus again. The ink flows this time slowly. Then steadily you begin. To write, not a lesson, not an argument. Not something to impress your father or earn a nod from a scholar with napkin lips. Just something true. You write your name. You write the words. I am still learning. Then a line, then a pause, then a goat. Small, lopsided, wearing a scroll. Like a crown, Diocles says nothing. When you finally look up, he nods once. Not proudly, not reluctantly. Just enough to acknowledge that something has ended. Something else might now begin. You leave the scroll on the desk. You don't tie the ribbon. You walk out. Not quietly, not reverently, just walking. For the first time, you aren't leaving a lesson. You're carrying one with you. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. The room is quiet now. The scrolls have been put away or left open. It's just a little, as if the words inside still need to breathe. The wax tablet rests where you left. The goat still scratched into the corner, eyes forever slightly uneven. The sunlight has shifted. The bench is warm from where you sat, and in the quiet, something stays behind. It's not knowledge exactly, but something softer. You listened, you watched, you tried. And in between the silences, you learned how to be part of a world that didn't always notice you. Thank you for staying all the way through this long, dusty journey into the ancient schools of Greece. If you made it this far, maybe you found something gentle in the repetition, something to settle the thoughts, or even lull them into stillness. Or maybe, just maybe, you drifted off somewhere around the second goat with a scroll hat. Perfectly fine, too. There will be another story and another scroll waiting next time. And tonight, you're the one who must carry the wax tablet once more.